Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 206, Holm versus Vieira, also known as UFC Vegas 55. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network, Mr. Keith Shillan.
It's always showtime at BetMGM Sports. You can make your first bet risk-free up to $1,000 when you sign up with the code Sherdog. Don't let another game day go by without having the ultimate sports betting app in the palm of your hand. Discover non-stop excitement with BetMGM's state-of-the-art technology and dozens of betting options, including live wagers, props, parlays, and much more. No matter what your favorite sport is or how you like to wager, find out why there's nothing like getting a W at the king of sportsbooks. Use the code SHERDOG and make your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Arizona, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, Nevada, New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, or Wyoming only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire in 7 days from issuance. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, Washington, D.C., Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, and Virginia. Call 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help. In Michigan, 1-800-GAMBLER. In Illinois, Indiana, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Tennessee, call the Red Line at 800-889-9789. In Mississippi, call 1-888-777-9696. Sports betting is void where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada.
Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. We got 10 fights, a couple good ones, a couple terrible ones, but it's always, bad fights is still better than like the best hockey game, the best baseball. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Bad fights is still better. So I'm excited. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, and I kind of agree with you. Like, in general, bad fights better than no fights. Bad fights, better than pretty good versions of a lot of other sports. I mean, obviously, way back in the day, Dana White was famous for that thing. If you're on a street corner and over there they're having a baseball game, and over there they're playing a football game, and over in that corner they're having a fight, you're going to go watch the fight. Well, of course you are, because a law is probably being broken. You're going to see if anybody needs help.
It's funny because he's had said some stupid stuff like fighting is going to be bigger than soccer and all this stuff. But I don't hate that one because it is true.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always like. I joke with friends who like try to talk shit about MMA, and I'd be like, "It's the most popular sport in the world." And then I literally steal Dana White's. Yeah. And play it off as like it's my own.
Dude, it's true. Even it's like meta true within the UFC, because I remember one of the last events I covered live in Houston, maybe 262. I can't remember. Anyway, it was in the middle of kind of a boring fight in the cage, and all of a sudden the fight broke out in the stands. And there were more people watching the fight in the stands than the fight in the cage. So even in the middle of like your sport MMA, like a real fight breaks out where someone's getting broken off, and like you see all the phones come out and like all the lights are shining in that direction.
Yeah. I know I don't follow basketball at all. Like I used to watch it back in the day, but it just one of these things. You start having kids and different things. You have other responsibilities. So I haven't really watched any of the NBA playoffs. But I know Chris Paul almost got in a fight with a fan, and Chris Paul's mama or something like that was getting into it. Like, we love illegal fights. It is what it is.
Yep, it is. What this card is, as you pointed out, 10 fights. That, I mean, if it goes through that way, that'll be the shortest UFC card, short by design, not because of last-minute cancellations, in probably a full year. I mean, I'll have to look back and check that.
Longer than that.
I mean, we had a couple of 9-fight cards last year, but it's because things fell apart during fight week.
COVID and yeah.
Here and it would have been 11, but a way back, this card was supposed to have Ben Rothwell versus Alexander Gustafsson off it. Cold-hearted, the UFC cut Rothwell after the fight was already booked, and then Gustafsson, they never found him another opponent, or at least not one that he would accept. So this went from 11 to 10 fights, and personally, having seen, 2 fights worth of the Alexander Gustafsson experiment at heavyweight, I'm just fine with it being 10.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who they would have dug up to instead of getting Ben Roth. Like, who could have filled in? Like, could you dug up Evan Cole? I mean, who are you trying to? What would be an easy win for Gustafsson? Go pull up Paul Bonatello somewhere? Like,
dude, I mean, we're about to talk about Parker Porter as a short notice replacement, so I can tell you what kind of people they could have found.
Yeah, I think Parker Porter might be better than Ben Rothwell right now.
Man, I almost don't want to start diving into this too much.
That's what we got. We got to throw a poll up there because this is what the people want to talk about. Who's tougher, Ben Rothwell or Connecticut's own Parker Porter?
Whew. I'll see if I can add a poll to this. Do you want to just dive in and start talking about these prelims?
Yeah, let's do it.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 206, featherweights take the cage, and it is Chase Hooper versus Felipe Diaz Colares. Hooper, the 22-year-old Washington State native, is 10-2-1 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC in 2019. He has alternated wins and losses. Defeated Daniel Tamer in his debut, lost to Alex Caceres, beat Peter Barrett, and most recently, last June at UFC 263, dropped a unanimous decision to Steven Peterson. He will be taking on Colares. The 28-year-old Brazilian is 10-3 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as the Jungle Fight featherweight champ. He won the vacant title, then immediately vacated it again to join the UFC. He has alternated wins and losses as well. He is just on the downswing of that. He lost to Geraldo de Freitas, beat Domingo Pilarte, lost to Montel Jackson, beat Luke Sanders, and most recently, last October, dropped a split decision to Chris Gutierrez at UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Rodriguez. Early odds on this one, again, go to BetMGM for the latest lines. But, as of a week out from the fight, Colares, slight favorite. He's minus 160, Hooper plus 140. I mean, Keith, Chase Hooper had a little bit of buzz when he entered the UFC just because he was so incredibly young. I mean, he was 20 years old, one of the youngest fighters ever to get a win in the UFC. I can't remember if he's the youngest, but he's in the top 3. And he had that kind of goofy charisma. He went around pretending he was Ben Askren's illegitimate kid just because they basically have the same hair. Obviously, as he's alternated wins and losses against unranked middle-of-the-road featherweights in the UFC, a lot of that buzz is gone. But I don't know, man. He's at this point, I kind of ask myself, okay, what one thing does he do at a UFC level? At 22, he's not going to be a finished product, but what one thing does he do? And the one thing he does is he is a physically large, lanky, long-limbed featherweight who creates matchup problems just by his very size and puts it to good use on the ground. He's a, very good opportunistic grappler, but I think even that's almost to his detriment, because if that's your only way you can win fights at a UFC level, you're going to turn into a guy that's just looking for low percentage submissions and getting walloped on fight after fight. The guys that he's come up against that can take care of themselves on the ground, Alex Caceres and Steven Peterson, have handled him. The guys that weren't really UFC level, he has run game on them on the ground. That's just not a recipe for longevity in the UFC featherweight division, which is, 1, incredibly deep and competitive, and 2, filled with physical specimens, like serious athletes who are going to make his relative lack of strength and relative lack of just athletic pop really stick out. He reminds me of kind of like a featherweight Mickey Gall, where he got signed too early, too inexperienced, and just didn't have many tools. And Gall has stuck around to the point where, hey, it's like 5 years later, he's pushing 30 now, and he's kind of grown into his body and into his strength. He's become just kind of another mid-roster welterweight. Only time will tell whether Hooper follows that road, but he's not going to get a whole lot more rope. And he's taking on someone in Felipe Colares that, even though he's moving up from bantamweight, is probably going to be stronger than he is and is capable of taking care of himself on the ground. Like, he's a good grappler. I think this is a bad matchup for Hooper. I kind of agree with the line where Colares is a slight to medium favorite. I don't think he's going to tap Hooper out, but I think he's just going to outlast him. I think he'll be able to keep it on the feet if he wants. If it goes to the ground, as long as he watches out for like sneaky like heel hooks and knee bars and stuff, I think he's going to be fine, and he's probably going to punish Hooper for trying that stuff. So give me Felipe Colares by decision, and yeah, probably just kind of a deflating, discouraging outing for Chase Hooper.
Yeah. So Chase Hooper was never a guy on the Contender Series that I liked. Like, I didn't think he should have got a contract. I didn't think he was that good. I didn't think he was ready. And I haven't seen much improvement since. I mean, he's a southpaw who's just, his striking is very raw. I mean, he got outstruck by Steven Peterson, who's not really known for his striking. I mean, he got out wrestled too, but he's got some long reach. He marches down his foe, which you like. He's got insane output, so he's got to put himself in a fight. Like, he's got some, yes, but like, what's the one thing he can do well? He's insanely tough. He might not be talented, but his toughness is second to none. Like, he'll take a beat and keep going. He throws punches straight down the pipe, but he isn't really an athlete. His strikes are slow. He lacks power. There's not much arsenal in strikes, like very basic arm punches. Did like the same 1-2 combination over and over again to try to hit Alex Caceres. I think I said before, looks like a guy who just does like a lot of body, like heavy bag stuff, and just does like the same combination. Like, a coach calls out like 1-2, and he just does it, and then he tries doing it in a fight. He doesn't react to strikes well. Like, he kind of flops a little bit when he gets hit, and almost reacts like he makes it look worse than the actual strike is. But in fairness, like, while he gets hit, he's tough. He's got to keep coming. He's going to hit. His head's going to go flying back, and then he's going to take another step forward and get hit again. And he's a weak wrestler. Like, though he's relentless to get the fight to the ground, he'll get it there because of that nonstop. It's more like the pace is tough. He'll pull guard. He'll aim an Ari roll, like whatever has. If he just bull rushes, runs at his opponent, he'll do anything to close the distance. If he gets on top, he's got some pretty good ground and pound. Some slick back takes. I mean, to his credit, he did take Alex Caceres' back in their fight. And he's very aggressive to get a submission. And he's got those long arms and legs that he can lock on a submission. I mean, you go back to like the Peter Barrett fight. He was able to make a comeback win in a fight that he was getting killed in. And he gets a submission off his back. But overall, like, he's such a minus athlete that I think he still needs like 2 or 3 more years of seasoning in the minors. And it's just one of these guys, like, some guys aren't meant to be in the UFC, and I'm starting to question if that was the case with Chase Hooper. Like, you can get as much season you want, you can be in the minors for a long time, but being a regional fighter, just like minor league baseball, some guys just don't get the call up. Colares, he's a high pressure striker who really likes to brawl. I go back to like the Montel Jackson fight. He was getting tagged up by a hard hitting Montel Jackson. He just marched forward regardless, and it made a very entertaining fight. Throws lots of kicks. He follows his kicks to land strikes or just to gain ground, very like Tim Mean style. He likes to get inside and throw down. He's got weak takedown defense, which is not good against a guy like Chase Hooper, and he makes matters worse, going to jump on a guillotine. But he's hard to hold down, and but in his ability to get back up to his feet, he will give up his back, which is very like Chuck Liddell style, just like turn it back and pop right up, which obviously against a good back taker is dangerous. But he is a submission threat himself. He has 5 submission wins in his career. As far as predictions go, I'm going with Colares too. I just don't trust Hooper. Could he suddenly make huge improvements from fight to fight based on he's so young? Yeah, it could. But I need to see it first before I start trusting him. I think Colares is a strong stylistic matchup for Hooper. Like, if Hooper's going to beat someone, Colares is the kind of guy, because he'll give him the opportunities. He already has a weak like takedown defense, and he'll like jump guard, give him the chance. But I still think he struggles, because I thought Peterson was the same way. Like, Peterson was a good if you're going to beat someone in the UFC. Peterson's one of them. Colares is kind of in that same category. I see Colares being smart enough to just kind of play a sprawl and brawl game. And I think he just batters on the feet in those exchanges that he has. Give me Colares and a pretty lopsided decision.
There you go. 2 strong picks for Felipe Colares to continue reigning on the Hooper Parade in the UFC. Next up at UFC Vegas 55 is a bantamweight matchup between Jonathan Martinez and Vince Morales. Martinez, the 28-year-old East Texas native by way of Dallas. By way of Denver. He's a Factory X product now. Is 15-4 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC and has followed a kind of a perfect pattern. He has lost 1 and won 2 throughout his UFC career. The most recent trio, a loss to Davy Grant last March, then back-to-back decision wins over Zviad Lazishvili and Alejandro Perez. The most recent of those, the Perez fight, was back in February at UFC Fight Night, Makhachev versus Green. He'll be taking on Morales, the 31-year-old Idaho native by way of Las Vegas. He trains out of Syndicate MMA, is 11-5 overall. He is 3-3 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series, but he lost on the Contender Series, picked up 1 win in Bellator, and then joined the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak, those being a unanimous decision over Draco Rodriguez last August at UFC 265 and a first-round knockout of Louis Smolka at UFC on ESPN Font versus Aldo last December. Despite the win streak for Morales, he is the slight underdog here. Early odds have Martinez around -180, Morales around +155. But again, those are early lines. Do go to BetMGM and check the most recent lines before you make any sort of investment. Keith, 2 intriguing bantamweights. 2 bantamweights that I didn't think either of these guys had top 15 upside in the UFC based on Morales's bad loss on the Contender Series, based on Martinez's bad loss to Andre Sukumtat in his debut. But here they both are. And either of these guys, I mean, they're both on 2-fight win streaks. Either of these guys is kind of right on the verge of being on that radar. Who do you have in this one?
You fight to mention Rhode Island's own Andre Sukumtat. Yeah, this is an intriguing matchup. Like, both guys are guys that, I mean, they're not going to be top 15 contenders, but they're always going to be like a tough test. Like, if you're a rising prospect and you have to face Jonathan Martinez, that's your first tough test. And I think the same can be said about Vince Morales. So Martinez is a southpaw with some really good distance striking. He's very kickboxing style, really good technique, just sharp striker, fast hands. He does be a little bit of a point fighter. He lacks that like one punch fight ending knockout power, but he works behind a pretty jab, likes to target the body, mixes punches and kicks well, and is recently, he's always been a kicker, but recently it's like he's upped it a lot. Tons of kicks, teep kicks, will quickly throw up a high kick to check the chin. I love that he'll occasionally toss out a flying knee. Now, while he is a great striker, he was knocked out by Davy Grant. But I think just you guys get caught. It just happens. Not much of a grappler. You don't see any offensive grapple from him ever, and he has been taken down in a lot of fights. But he does pretty well to work back to his feet. He wants to have a kickboxing match. Morales, a lot of things I'm gonna say is he has been in the cage for his last fight. I think did he get COVID or something? I feel like he pulled out. I think fight week, didn't he? His last fight.
It was. I don't think it was him. I think it was like one of his cornermen. There was a protocol thing, but
something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
He's a volume striker. He's a high pressure striker, high volume, accurate, pretty elusive to avoid shots. He's a little slip and rip style. I'd say plus power. Like he's got more power than Martinez. He also has a killer instinct. Like if he hurts his opponent, he swarms on them, which I really like. Mixes takedowns in well. He's not one dimensional. He does well to drive through the drive through the hips. Excuse me. He's got some weak defensive wrestling though. Like it just seems like so many guys I say that about one on the other. It's usually those are guys who don't come from a wrestling background, so they kind of focus on one instead of the other. He does have 2 submission wins, so that's something you can watch for. But he has been submitted like 2 out of his out of his 5 losses, he's been submitted 2 of them. So he's not like a wizard or anything. I'm surprised Martinez is like a 2-1 favorite, almost a 2-1 favorite. Like I think this is a 50-50 as they come. Morales' output is pretty impressive, and he's probably the better wrestler. So he's a more well-rounded fighter. But I just like the variety in Martinez striking. I like how much his kicks have come along. It's really his high kick has started to become a pretty good threat. I think he's a little quicker too. So I will go with the favorite and give me Martinez and a pretty close decision.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you put out there. I've got to say that the move to Factory X has really done wonders for Martinez because he's the same basic fighter. He wanted to be a distant striker who kind of determined the range and the rhythm of the contest. And he just wasn't able to impose that on early opponents very well, including Andre Sukumtat, who, I mean, all respect to Rhode Island, was not a world beater at the UFC level. But he's just displaying so much more power in his kicks. And I have to think that's just due to working with a good, like, Muay Thai camp and a good coach in Mark Montoya, who just has him throwing harder and has him throwing a better variety of kicks. This is a fight where I'm a little surprised at the early lines, same as you are. And this is one where, especially earlier in Martinez's run, I would have thought this was like kind of tailor-made for Morales to win. Like, he's going to be able to get inside Martinez's kicking range. He's going to be able to take him down if he wants and kind of bully him there. Because I think he's a little physically stronger than Martinez. But those things have all been shored up. I'm still leaning slightly towards Morales here, but I'm a lot less confident about it than I would have been if they'd met, say, like 2 years ago. But give me Morales in the mild upset here by decision. I expect that he's going to keep Martinez out of his comfort zone. He's going to be coming forward. He's going to be forcing Martinez to use his footwork to stay in his preferred range, which is going to blunt Martinez's output, and it's going to make Morales' already higher striking volume probably seem even more so by comparison. So just give me Morales to win 2 rounds out of 3 here. Maybe there's one round where he makes Martinez spend a lot of time on the ground, but this should be a real fun one. Next up, it is a lightweight matchup between Omar Morales and Uros Medic. Morales, the 36-year-old Venezuelan, is 11-2 overall. He is 3-2 in the UFC. Since joining out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. It is worth noting that while he is 3-2 in the UFC, he's 2-0 at lightweight in the UFC. Look at the man's picture. There, look at it. It's on your screen right now. That dude decided he should try to cut to featherweight. Didn't work out so hot. At any rate, at lightweight, he's undefeated. Determining whether he stays that way will be Medic. The 29-year-old Serb, by way of Alaska, now by way of Southern California, is 7-1 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He won his debut smashing Alen Cruz in the first round at UFC 259 last March. Came back last September and got choked out in the got choked out late in the first round by Jailton Turner. That was at UFC 266. The odds here are fairly close, but in the early going, Omar Morales minus 155, Medic plus 135 or so. Keith, I'll say this much. I'm glad that Morales is just apparently deciding to stick at lightweight. I mean, he is ridiculously jacked, and it's not like he's a 5'6" guy. You know, you look at that picture, you're not looking at Chad Mendez. Like, he's a big guy. It was ridiculous that he kept trying to make featherweight, and especially in your mid-30s, like, that weight cut just seemed not to make much sense. But he's got a guy in Medic that, at the very least, is going to remind him what a good size UFC lightweight looks like, because Medic is huge. I mean, he's not a super plus athlete, but he's really big for lightweights, and he's strong. I mean, he bowled over Alen Cruz and just smashed him up in the first round. Those who have followed our show for a long time may remember that I picked Medic to lose his debut against Cruz just based on him having had so many really fast finishes in Alaska before joining the UFC. And just because he is a titanic lightweight who had fought at welterweight as well, I was just like, you know what? Between the first time UFC thing, between the big weight cut, between never having been pushed like really past like the first round, I'm going to pick Alon Cruz in the upset. His actual coaches at Anchorage BJJ came for us, and damn if they weren't right, because he just steamrolled Cruz. But then next fight, he ran into someone in Jalen Turner that he couldn't just steamroll because Turner is even bigger, and on top of all that, a plus athlete.
Yeah, and very good.
Yeah, and very good. And Turner just made it look so easy on the ground against Medic. Just effortless positional advances, took his back and choked him out, and again just made them look a class apart. Even though Medic is the slight underdog here, this is a fight that to me is kind of built for him to bounce back. He's gonna be bigger than Morales, and while I think his best routes to victory lie in getting it on the ground, like, you know, Morales, he's aging. Like, I don't know even at lightweight what his gas tank is going to look like if this thing gets out of the first round. I don't know why I'm still hung up on the idea of an Uros Medic fight getting out of the first round, but you know, it's got to happen one of these times. And Morales might be the guy because, you know, for all that he looks like a comic book hero, you know, his fights aren't always like complete barn burners. I'm leaning towards Medic here to win kind of a grindy decision. You know, I imagine he'll be working for the takedown quite a bit. I imagine there will be some lengthy clinch exchanges, and it'll just be a matter of who can kind of impose their preferred game plan, because Morales is probably going to want Medic off him. So yeah, give me Medic in the slight upset here by decision.
Yeah, so you mentioned Morales is extremely physically strong. I mean, this guy's chiseled. I think we view him a little differently. Like, I think he has a little bit of Francisco Trinaldo in him, and what I mean by that is, like, some fights can be painful to watch, and some fights he has very good output. Like Trinaldo's last fight, he had good output.
Yeah,
and I've seen Morales be very aggressive.
You know, and you make a good point, because Trinaldo's last fight was at the higher weight class, and he clearly fed off that with a better gas tank. So good point. Keep going.
Yeah, Morales, I'd say, has plus power. He has some. He doesn't move his head enough. He kind of like walks through punches, which is not good when you go against like a Giga Chikadze and he just butches you up. But he throws hard leg kicks, and he checks leg kicks, which very few fighters that do. He's a good wrestler, good entries, solid top side grappler. He's smart at like winning rounds, just getting takedown late. I was surprised about how easily he was submitted by Jonathan Pierce, though. But I think Jonathan Pierce is starting to show that he's actually feeling much better than a lot of people thought.
On a scale from OSP to GSP, he's kind of in the middle at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Medish, he's a southpaw that you mentioned is huge for the weight class, long and lengthy. He's 6'1", 70-inch reach. You're talking about how big Morales is. Medish is even bigger. A kickboxer with a lot of kickboxing experience. He isn't a top-notch athlete, but he's very unorthodox, which is hard to read. He'll come out, like you mentioned, he'll come out like a bat out of hell, come out of his corner like he's possessed, but he'll throw out spinning attacks. The way he came out against Alon Cruz, like, he was knocking Cruz out before Cruz, I think even Cruz knew the fight started. Like, he was right on him. But it's a double-edged sword, as you mentioned. He got tagged up by Jalen Turner for that same style. Medish is accurate with his aggression, and he's got some pop in his hands. He does like to force his opponent back on their back foot. He does a lot of it with kicks. His kicks are dangerous, too. He folded Mikey Rolls on the Contender Series with body kicks. And he also has like a Tim Mean style where he'll throw kicks, long-range kicks, to just kind of follow in to get into the clinch. But his defensive wrestling is a bit of an Achilles heel. He struggles when he's taken down, struggles off his back. Though he does have subs off his back, he'll go for like a knee bar or heel hook, but he's still spending times on his back. And as you mentioned, we haven't seen him go past the second round, so cardio is a question mark. Now, it's not like an alert because we don't know, but it's something that, can't be confident in. Now, as far as prediction, this is a really tough one. It's a tough one because both guys have looked brilliant in fights, and both guys have not. Both guys did not look good in their last fight. Medish has the raw skills and aggression. He's the younger guy. But Morales might actually, even though they're built differently, Morales has some really deceiving strength. Morales is going to have to weather an early storm. I think he's gonna. And I think once he does, I think he's gonna start finding holes and mesh his attack. And I think he start landing the better shots. I'm gonna take Morales, but with like zero confidence. I'll give you Morales by decision.
There you go. A bit of disagreement, but neither of us super confident in these picks. Just too many unknowns in place. Should be fun. No guarantee it will stay this way, but at least as the card is constituted about a week out from Fight Night, the opener of the prelims is a heavyweight matchup between Jailton Almeida and Parker Porter. Almeida, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 15-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 1-0 in the UFC since joining out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He made his debut in February, knocking out Danilo Marques in 2 minutes and 57 seconds at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Strickland. He had been scheduled to take on Maxime Grishin this weekend. Grishin pulled out, and rather than find a replacement at light heavyweight, Almeida chose to meet a late notice replacement at heavyweight. That replacement will be Parker Porter. Porter, the 37-year-old Connecticut native, is 12-6 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He joined, lost to fellow debutant Chris Daukaus at UFC 252 all the way back in August of 2020, got knocked out in the first round. Since then, he's come back with 3 straight wins, all by decision, those coming over Josh Parisian, Chase Sherman, and Alan Baudot. The most recent of those, the Baudot fight, was in February at UFC Fight Night Walker versus Hill. Despite that nice little streak, and despite the fact that his opponent will be moving up in weight to meet him, Porter is, as of early odds, the biggest underdog on the card. Make sure to go to betmgm.com for the most up-to-date odds, but right now, early lines have Almeida at -600, Porter at +400 as, again, the substantial underdog. I was thinking about something, Keith, and I'm going to bounce this off you here. If you took someone who knew nothing about mixed martial arts and you took the top 10 of every division in the UFC, men and women, and you just lined up those top 10 and you asked them, okay, which of these groups of people looks like tough people and the best fighters in the world, they'd pick light heavyweight. And probably at any point in the UFC's history of the last 15 years, they'd pick light heavyweight.
Except for the champion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe except for the champ, and even he looks like a bouncer or a bodyguard from like an action movie, just this kind of grizzled. But I mean, light heavyweight.
He could play like that. He could play like that, like a movie about mafia members, and then you have like the foreign drug dealers, and he's like the henchman for the sleazy, like John Leguizamo is the drug cartel guy, and he's one of the henchmen behind him.
Which belies the fact that he is the nicest dude in the sport. But but generally speaking, 205, there's not really any like out of shape looking dudes. There's not really any like short dumpy guys. Most of them look like superheroes. The tall guys don't look like weird like skinny freaks. Like it's the tough looking guy division. Even by those standards, Jailton Almeida is a fucking unit. This guy.
I wonder where you're going. Yeah.
Well, he's going to be moving up to heavyweight, and I'm interested to see what he weighs in at, because I think it's going to be that Linton Vassell thing where he's going to show up on the scale, look basically the same, and all of a sudden he weighs 246.
Oh my god!
And
I've seen Linton Vassell in person since he's moved up to heavyweight, and he's the scariest looking dude in the world.
And how did this guy ever make 205? I think that's what's going to happen when we see Jailton Almeida. The thing is, I have a lot of faith in him as a prospect at 205. When I say he has top 10 upside, light heavyweight is so desperate right now that, 2 more wins, he's on the cusp of the top 15. They're getting so old. They're all beating up on each other. Other prospects are getting, knocked off in weird ways. People like Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann, Jamal Hill have all kind of like hit bumps on the road. But he has some problems with his game. He fights with a level of abandon that makes me wonder what's going to happen to his gas tank when he can't just run over somebody in 3 minutes. While he is a dangerous striker offensively, he's pretty porous defensively, and he charges in pretty heedlessly. It's just a matter of time before someone rings him up hard. It's kind of like a lesser version of the Johnny Walker thing, where he's so aggressive that somebody who's more disciplined is just going to bust him right in the chops one of these times, like Corey Anderson did to Walker. So there are all these things that, I think about that somebody might be able to take advantage of. I just don't know if Parker Porter's the guy to be able to do it. Because Parker Porter, he's not a huge one-shot, like, kill shot artist with his hands or his feet. He punches decently hard. He has very hard leg kicks, but he's not going to knock out Jailton Almeida with one leg kick. I am wondering how easily Almeida will be able to get Porter down, if he is at all, because while his record looks like a pretty nice mix of knockouts and submissions, everything runs off the ground game. A good number of his knockouts happened on the ground, and his best weapon is just taking top position and beating people up until he can find a submission. I am interested to see whether he'll be able to take down Parker Porter effortlessly. Porter looks like he should have good takedown defense. I mean, he's built like one of those little inflatable punch dummies you get for kids that have like the sand in the bottom, so you punch them and they bounce back up. Just the way he's kind of, he's not tall. He's like 6 feet tall. He's barrel chested and then has these giant legs. He looks like he should be hard to take down, but I just don't have the faith in him to be able to take advantage of any of the flaws that Almeida has at this point, or probably even last to the point where we get to see Almeida's gas tank. As much as I'd like to say there's value on Porter as what is now a 4-1 underdog, I do see Almeida, winging some punches at Porter, maybe taking a few in return. But the minute he doesn't get something he likes, I think he's just going to be able to body lock and trip this man, land in top position, pound on him some, and then, when he turns his back, take his back and choke him out. So give me Jailton Almeida by first round submission. And then the debate afterwards will be, does he try to stick around at heavyweight? Does he decide he doesn't like that huge weight cut? Or is this just a one-off thing and does he go straight back down?
Yeah. So you're talking about how big Almeida is, and obviously he is, but like Parker Porter is a massive dude. I was thinking, you talked about his leg kicks and his legs. I was like, his thighs are like the biggest things I've seen. Like, what is bigger? Like, Parker Porter's thighs are like Tisha Torres's waist. Like, I need to know that. Like, that's gonna be pretty close.
I mean, Tisha, well, she's 5'1" and she's very fit. She's probably got like a 20-inch waist. I bet Parker Porter's legs are bigger.
I don't know what, obviously I wear like men's jeans, but 26, 24. I mean, I don't know what her, like, it's got to be pretty clever.
Yeah, she'd be bigger than 20, but yeah, like 22 or 23-inch waist. Like, his legs are probably bigger than that.
It's probably pretty close. Like, I just
he's just like his jeans could just put a Tisha Torres in each leg and just do a sack race.
Yeah. So he's a minus athlete. I mean, we were joking about heavyweights that could fill in to fight Alexander Gustafsson. I mentioned like Paul Bonatello, who's like probably like 50 years old right now. Like, if Parker Porter and Paul Bonatello did like a obstacle course, like, I don't know if I'm betting on Parker Porter. I mean, like, the longer the obstacle course, I would, but like a little short one that would take maybe like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. I might bet on the headhunter on that one. He's very like lumbering, plodding, early 2000s UFC heavyweight style. He's slow, but he just makes up for it by being a tough dude. He walks down his opponents. He's not very technical. His striking is very basic, throws the same basic combos, loves his winging overhand right. He has power, but you mentioned that he's not a one-punch, knock it out kind of guy. But he's got these powerful leg kicks, tons of defensive flaws, though. Lacks head movement. When he does move, I mentioned before, he always kind of dips to the same right side awkwardly. Like, he's going to get high kicked into the face. Like a prime Mirko Krokop, he would have been the perfect opponent for. He would just dip right into a high kick. He also like just walks through shots and just like eat them. But he makes the mistake of also like getting hit with a big shot and then trying to answer with one back, kind of like what I call like Robert Whittaker-ish. But he's a underrated wrestler. Like, he got takedowns against Josh Breezy, got takedowns against Chase Sherman, got takedowns against Alan Bordeaux. He has 3 submissions on his record, and he's kind of the guy who just like, he sticks around. Like, he's losing a fight until suddenly like it goes to the scorecards. You're like, damn, did I just give it to Parker Porter? Like, I think he won, and that's just like he's not gonna win.
I felt that way in the Sherman and Parisian fights.
Yeah.
Like, you
Suddenly
described it perfectly.
Yeah, like he's losing, and then you're like, yeah, this guy's better than him. But he just won 2 rounds. And you give and that could happen in this fight. Now, Almeida, he's one of these guys I'm not too concerned moving up to heavyweight because you mentioned he's huge. And it's just like his frame. He's these long arms, these long legs. I think I read he has a 79-inch reach, which can translate to heavyweight. You mentioned he's not a very technically sound striker. He's just like a buzzsaw, but he has some serious power. And I wonder if he's not cutting weight, how much more power will he have? A lot of kicks, teep kicks, calf kicks. He's a good wrestler, fast entries. Also can get in the clinch, strong takedowns. I go back to his fight against, and I might pronounce the name wrong, but Nazaradinov, I think his name, who's a good Sambo practitioner. He took him down 3 or 4 times. He's a very high level BJJ grappler. He's been, I look at his record, and he's been competing in high level BJJ tournaments. Has submission wins. Got some great back takes. One time I saw him on his back, and he got a sweep, which you like. He doesn't just play jiu-jitsu, but that always worries me. The guys who's going to play on the back, I could see Parker Porter just holding him down and winning. But when he's on top, hammering, vicious ground and pound. So Almeida is really good addition to the UFC heavyweight division, or just the UFC in general. While Parker Porter, if we're being honest, he's just a journeyman. I'm very surprised by the lines just because of Parker Porter being on a 3-fight winning streak. I thought I assumed Almeida would be the favorite, but I was going to guess 2-1, not 6-1. But I've seen Almeida take down better wrestlers than Porter in the past. I see him just taking Porter down over and over again, batter him with ground and pound. I think Porter eventually makes a mistake, and I think Almeida is actually going to catch him in submission. Give me Almeida by 2nd round submission.
There you go. 2 picks for Jailton Almeida to make a successful debut at heavyweight with a submission of Parker Porter. Next up, it is the middleweights as Joseph Holmes and Alen Amedovski meet in a matchup that, well, if you follow the Shillan and Duffy recap, might have some bearing on the cut list, as both of these men are still looking for their first win in the octagon. Holmes, the 26-year-old Texan who goes by Ugly Man, which, by the way, I mean, I'm not the best judge, but he seems like a perfectly handsome dude to me. I've never understood that, but whatever. He is 7-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series, was not immediately signed, so he won one fight in Fury Fighting Championship, then was signed. He debuted in January, losing a unanimous decision to Jamie Pickett at UFC on ESPN, Kattar versus Chikadze. He will be welcoming back to the octagon Amedovski, the 34-year-old Macedonian-born, I believe, lives in Italy and has been training in Sweden. He's been at All Stars Training Center. There are some pictures of him out there being absolutely dwarfed by Khamzat Chimaev, the welterweight. So anyway, he is 8-2 overall. He is 0-2 in the UFC since joining as a fairly prominent Bellator middleweight, but he lost back-to-back fights to Krzysztof Jotko and John Phillips. That's the bad news. The other bad news is that the most recent of those fights, the Phillips fight, was over 2.5 years ago. That was all the way back in September of 2019. So it is back-to-back losses and a lengthy layoff for the 34-year-old, again, still looking for his first octagon win. He is not favored to do so. While you should definitely go to BetMGM and look for the most up-to-date lines, the early lines have Holmes out there at -205 or so, Amedovski around +175. I mean, this seems like a pretty straightforward style matchup to me. Holmes is a willing striker, but he does his best work on the ground, and he wants the fight on the ground. In the Jamie Pickett fight, that's what it really boiled down to. He tried repeatedly to get Jamie Pickett down for the first 2 rounds, never really could. 3rd round, he just kind of gave up on the takedown and just got slightly the worse of a kickboxing match. So really the question to me is, can he get Amedovski down without getting knocked out? Amedovski, to me, feels like a throwback. He feels just like a mid-roster guy from 2005. He's just kind of a brawler. He hits hard and he comes forward aggressively, and that's basically it. He's a guy that, on a, again, 2005 card, Mike Goldberg would have just said, has very heavy hands. just because it's the only nice thing he can think to say about him. On his way up, fighting lower level competition, he knocked out a bunch of dudes in the first round. Once he ran into stiffer competition, I mean, Krzysztof Jotko made him look silly. And then it's not a good sign when you get plunked by John Phillips, who turned out not to be a UFC level guy in like 17 seconds. I can't imagine that the time off has made Amedovski better or seriously diversified his game. I don't care that he's been working out at All Stars with like, Shemaev and Gustafsson and stuff. It's a camp. It's not magic. It's not Hogwarts. I'm gonna guess that Holmes, who for whatever his faults may be, does have a good chin and is reasonably defensively sound on the feet. He's going to be able to kind of push Amedovski around. He's going to be way bigger than him. Holmes is a very tall middleweight. He's like 6'3", 6'4". I think he's going to be able to hold his own on the feet, get Amedovski down, and I'm going to say he gets it done. Give me Holmes to pick up a third-round submission on kind of just an exhausted and beaten down Alen Amedovski.
Yeah, the real question is how many times on the recap show I call Joseph Holm because Holm is
well, as long as you don't call him John Holmes, we'll be fine.
Okay. All right. So Joseph Holmes taking on Alen Terry Martin Amedovski.
That's perfect. Yes.
Very heavy-handed Terry Martin. Yeah. This is a really bad fight. Like even
Luigi Fioravanti.
Luigi Fioravanti. There you go. That makes the like the Italian connection.
Yeah.
Or Alessio Sakara. So yeah, this is not a good fight. Like I was watching these guys and like they're both not good. Like Holmes, you mentioned he's big for the weight class. He's like a bigger guy, which I like. He's long and lengthy. He's young, so that's good. He has like those physical tools going for him. I don't know if he's polished enough for the UFC. I know he got brought up on short notice in the last fight. I think he's kind of one of these guys who just right place, right time, maybe. He didn't look good against Jamie Pickett, who was not a very high-level UFC fighter. You mentioned his striking. I see his striking's okay at best. He's an out striker, long strikes, uses a lot of feints, which I do like, but a lot of single strikes. Tends to have tall man's defense. He pulls his head straight back. He throws a lot of kicks from range, which is smart. He loves throwing the high kick. He wants to get the fight to the ground, but he's not a good wrestler. Like he shoots for takedowns, but he couldn't get Jamie Pickett down. If he gets in the clinch, upper body takedowns from the clinch is what he looks for. And even though he's a grappler, like he's not like a wizard. I'd say he's decent on the ground. He's got some pretty good back takes. He got those long legs. If you get his hooks in, they're going to be hard to get out. He does have 5 submissions on his record, so that's good. Move over to Terry Martin. I mean, who knows what we're getting from him, considering Terry Martin hasn't been in the UFC in like 10 years. No, Amedovski, all jokes, he has been in the UFC for 3 years. He's 34 years old. I doubt he's getting better at that age. He got knocked out by John Phillips, which is it may be better off to get knocked out by Terry Martin right now than it is just getting knocked out to John. Just like shout out to Terry Martin who's watching our breakdown show right now. Like, what the hell, guys? Like, why are you picking on me? What's Luigi Fioravanti? What the hell in Italian? That's what we need to know. That should be the title of this one. What the hell means in Italian.
Che diabolos.
Yeah. He's very aggressive. I'll give him that. He presses forward. He throws these looping wild punches. He drops his hands and kind of throws from his hips. For a guy who's sounds like he would be a good wrestler. When you say Alen Amedovski, you just like that has a wrestling name. Like, and you're in the wrestling bracket. You look, you're in these like one of these national wrestling tournaments. You don't know anybody, and you look up and
Alen Amedovski from Macedonia. I'm like, oh shit! I'm going for a ride.
Yeah. But no, he's a bad wrestler. He struggles from the bottom. The one like good thing I've seen for him, and this is going back a while, he fought Jotko. He at one point he got on top of Jotko and landed some pretty good ground and pound, and then just got off him for no reason at all, because he wanted to throw down in the pocket. This fight's terrible. Both guys aren't very good, but I have some like hard rules when it comes. Like I have a few rules, and one of my rules is don't bet on the guy who got knocked out by John Phillips. So I'm gonna take Holmes too. I'll say Holmes gets a takedown. Takes his back, it submits him, and screw it. I'll say Holmes does in the very first round.
There you go. 2 picks for not John. Joseph Holmes to get it done by submission. The only difference is what round.
We got to think of like a grappler from like 2004 who was like an okay grappler, but they would make him sound like he was way better. I mean, I guess Travis Lutter would have been the one, but yeah, but like that's too easy. Like a
Kurt Pellegrino.
But like, there you go, Kurt Pellegrino versus Terry Martin. Well, we need someone like close to the weight class, like David Terrell or something. But David Terrell got that knockout against Matt Lindland, and then
I mean, really, you've described Drew McFedries versus Jordan Radev.
There you go.
And there you go. McFedries knocked his block halfway back to Bulgaria.
There you go. That's this fight.
Next up, and at least as the card is currently constituted, third from the top at UFC Vegas 55 is a middleweight matchup between one man who's probably overperformed in comparison to expectations when he entered the UFC versus one who arguably is underperformed. It is Eryk Anders and Jun-Yong Park. Anders, the 35-year-old Alabama native, is 14-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is an even 6-6 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is coming off a loss, a first-round armbar at the hands of Andre Muniz last December at UFC 269. That blunted the momentum of his weird 1-1 series with Darren Stewart over the first part of 2021. At any rate, he will be facing Park. The 31-year-old South Korean is 13-5 overall. He is 3-2 in the UFC. He dropped his UFC debut to Anthony Hernandez by second-round submission back in August of 2019. From there, rattled off 3 straight decision wins over Marc-Andre Barriault, John Phillips, and Tafon Njokuani before running into Gregory Rodriguez last October at UFC Fight Night Costa versus Vettori. He succumbed to punches in the second round there. So he'll be looking to get things back on track, as will Anders. Odds, at least the early odds, have Park as the substantial favorite to do so. He is minus 200 on the early lines. Anders plus 170. Keith, as I alluded, Anders never has quite seemed to fulfill the upside he seemed to have when he started in the UFC, where, Park, I mean, he's been feasting on low-level guys, but, he won 3 straight. Who do you got in this one?
Yeah, I think the issue with Anders is, I mean, he's a guy that he comes in the UFC, he got these high expectations thrown on him, and some guys just can't handle that kind of pressure. I mean, like, if he ever played other sports and was like a high-level athlete and ever played at a high-level sport, he'd probably be able to handle the pressure a little bit more. But I don't think
especially if he played in a setting where like winning was expected every single time out.
Yeah,
I think that would have done him some good.
Yeah, if you played like college football for like Alabama or something.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's no way Eryk Anders has done that, right? Like, I don't think anybody ever mentioned him playing for like Alabama, right?
I think we would have heard that if he had.
Yeah.
That's like saying like Brian Stam was in the Marines or something. Like we would have heard it at some point.
Yeah. I'm kind of done with Anders. He just isn't that good. Like, he's 35, as you mentioned. He's not improving. Besides being that good, he can be very boring. Like, a lot of his fights are very slow paced. He's a southpaw. He's kind of plodding, kind of a slow striker. Like, he's not the athlete that they'll talk about. They're gonna make him sound like he's explosive, outside linebacker, University of Alabama. It's like, yeah, when he was 21, he's 35 now. Like, that explosion is not there. There's not much variety in his strikes. It's some of the same old, like, overhand left, over and over again. He's got good but not great power. They're gonna make it sound like if he touches you, it's automatic, you're in dust, and it's not really the case. He's a decent grappler, though. I actually think he might be a little underrated grappler. He might actually, I actually think he's a better grappler than he is a striker. Though he was quickly submitted by Andre Muniz in his last fight, but like Muniz does that to everybody. Like I'm giving a pass on that. Muniz is legit. One thing that again Anders has done in the past, he has kind of gassed out. Looked like he's in the past. That's not really the case anymore. Like he doesn't seem, he seems to pace himself. He also fights at an extremely slow pace, so that might be why. But he's been hurt a lot. Like I go back to some of his fights, not necessarily knocked out, but like Joe Mershad hurt him. Obviously, Thiago Santos knocked him out. Khalil Rountree like butchered him for their fight. So, based on that age and all that damage, like I wouldn't be surprised if the bottom just drops out on him now. Move on to Park. Park's a pocket boxer, bit of a counter striker, throws really short, tight combos. He's very good at beating his opponent to the punch. He can throw a lot of calf kicks from the outside. He's also a very underrated grappler. You go back to like his Stephane Chukwu fight, he was getting like takedown and takedown. I mean, they really put on a clinic against Njokuani in the wrestling. Smother and top control, good ground and pound. What I like about his ground and pound is he makes sure he secures a position. He makes sure he has his opponent really secure before he starts looking to do damage. The one thing I'm worried about him is his chin. He was knocked out by Gregor Rodriguez in his last fight, and Gregor Rodriguez is one of those guys who does have the huge power. Rodriguez has the power that they pretend Anders has. It just isn't there. As far as prediction, this is one of the fights that, you're doing film study. You can't do film study in every fight. Like it just one of the ones. And this has nothing to do with Park. It has to do more with Anders. You pick and choose the fights you want to do to film study, and then I try to get as much as I can in a week, and you just run out. And Anders was one of the ones I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm picking Park. I think Park is too fast for Anders. I think he will get the better of the striking exchanges. He really must avoid the clinch and make sure Anders just doesn't overpower him and kind of force him against the clinch and kind of slow down the pace. However, he should be able to drop onto one of those big left hands that Anders throw. I can see him dropping on there and getting a takedown. I think we'll have some back and forth exchanges, but eventually I think Park picks up a decision win.
I'm with you here, and I think I may even have less faith in the 2022 version of Eryk Anders than you do. I agree that he's solved his early gas tank problems just by basically toning down his pace to suit his gas tank, but that's made like a lot of his fights bad, win or lose, and it's caused him to just lose some fights because he wasn't active enough. It was weird that he and Stewart decided to meet at light heavyweight in their second meeting. That sounds to me like a guy that's tired of making 185. Yeah, and I agree with you. And we've kind of talked about this thing a few times where people like Ovince St. Preux and Eryk Anders, they played Division I football, and by some definition, they are A-level athletes. They are guys that, at the very least, they could have like signed on with some NFL team as an undrafted free agent and stuck around on a roster for a couple of years. But the things that make you a great linebacker are not the same things that make you a great fighter, even physically. Like, what are the things they test at the NFL Combine? It's like straight line speed. It's the kind of agility that has you change direction after like sidestepping 10 yards as fast as you can go. It's bench pressing 225 pounds as many times as you can. None of these things really translate to punching and kicking other people. Like, they are A-level athletes by not necessarily the same standard.
Are you trying to tell me that a guy having a good time at a 3 cone drill doesn't make him a spectacular MMA fighter?
Yeah, it says nothing about his hand speed. It says nothing even really about his functional foot speed in a cage. Like, yeah, like I know you're like
you're trying to tell me that when they jump and they hit like all those, I don't know, they look like rulers on a stick up in the sky. What is that, the high jump? You're telling me the high jump, the vertical jump, doesn't make someone a high level striker?
Clearly not, because otherwise Kevin Randleman would have been undefeated. Like, you could see that dude jump, and like his wrestling shoes would clear the top of the octagon. It was ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, they're both outstanding athletes by a particular standard, but yeah, it's not made them necessarily quick strike knockout artists, because that's not what makes a quick strike knockout artist in MMA. Like, really what did it for OSP while it lasted was head kicks. I assure you that wasn't at the NFL Combine. Like, and I'm if Park wins this one, it will actually be his best UFC win. Like the 3 guys he's beaten, so like he beat on that win streak are, no bueno. Whereas Anders is still kind of a tough out. But I'm with you. I think Park is probably going to be able to get this fight to the ground. I think he'll have surprising amounts of success while they're on the feet. And if it goes to the 3rd round, which it very likely will, I think Park will be the fresher guy in the 3rd round. Of the 2 of them, he's probably a little bit smaller. He's the one that's never even like flirted with fighting at light heavyweight. He's younger. He's more active. Give me Junyoung Park by decision as well, but I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets some sort of 3rd round stoppage just by attrition, damage, exhaustion. But I'm going for Park by decision as well. We head now to the strawweight division for a matchup between Polyana Viana and Tabatha Ricci. Viana, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 12-4 overall. She is 3-3 in the UFC. Won her debut, then lost 3 in a row, but has bounced back since then with back-to-back submission wins over Emily Whitmire and Mallory Martin. The most recent of those, the Martin win, first-round armbar at UFC 258 back in February of 2021. She will be taking on Ricci. The 27-year-old Brazilian is 6-1 overall. She is 1-1 in the UFC. Lost her debut, but it was at flyweight. It was against Manon Fiorot that she even lasted to the 2nd round. And yeah, frankly, it's a feather in the cap. Came back from that with a unanimous decision win over Maria Oliveira at UFC Fight Night, Costa versus Vittori last October. So 2 women who were 500 in the UFC, one or the other will, all of a sudden have a winning record. It should be an interesting contrast between Viana, one of the tallest strawweights in the division, Ricci, one of the shortest. I would tell you that, size doesn't matter, but Ricci would not agree with me. The odds, Ricci's actually the slight favorite, so the bookmakers appear to agree with her. She is minus 150 on the early lines, Viana plus 130 or so. So, Keith, Ricci, she's a slight favorite, has a big test in front of her. She likes big tests. Who wins this one?
Yeah, this is a tough call because they're not the highest level fighters, and though you might not be gifted, God might not gift you something that they don't have the natural talent or ability. Sometimes you can do a lot with the little things you have.
Yeah.
So, Viana, she's one of the worst strikers in the division, and she has no power because she throws all arm punches. She tends to pull her head straight back to avoid strikes. She throws kicks a lot, but I think they're just trying to stay busy, and she kind of open to counters. She doesn't really check leg kicks. She keeps her chin high in the air. And her wrestling, is bad. She wants to get the fight to the ground, but she's not a good wrestler. She just kind of just dives into her shots. She'll even pull guard to get the fight to the canvas. And she's a serious threat on the ground, though. When she gets in the fight on the ground, she's a former world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, though she was submitted by Veronica Macedo, which is surprising. But she showed in the last 2 fights that you got to be aware at all times that she submitted Emily Whitmire. She submitted Mallory Martin. She can catch a submission in a scramble. She can catch a submission off her back. She's always looking to sweep to get back to her feet, which I like. And if she's on top, she has some good ground and pound. Now, Ricci she's really small for the weight class. I mean, she's only 5'1". She's a striker who could fight out of both stances. She's a bit of a boxer, a little bit of a pocket boxer who tends to fight in spurts. She loves her overhand right. She looks for it way too much. Defensively, she rolls with the punches, which I'm not a fan of, like the boxing rolls. But she's also a good grappler. She's a judo black belt. She likes takedowns from the clinch. She will shoot some outside entries, but without any setups. And she does have 2 submission wins on the ground. Now, I think this could be a really good grappling battle. I'm leaning Ricci, though. I think she's the better wrestler, so I expect her to be on top in the fight. I think she's going to avoid all the sub attacks from Viana. She's going to have to, and I think she's gonna. So give me Ricci in a really close battle.
Right. Oh, sorry. I was just changing Ricci's nickname from Baby Shark to Large Shark in the Fight Finder. I agree with your breakdown of the X's and O's here.
I love how you keep throwing all these jokes. And I hope I hope the listeners get what you're saying, because it really messed me up. I don't know what the hell I started when I was talking about. I was trying to get a reference in there, but I wasn't prepared like you were.
I agree with you that Viana is one of the worst strikers in the division. Like, really, her striking reminds me of Mackenzie Dern's, except that Dern really wants to hit hard, so she's like overthrowing like arm punches and stuff, and Viana's, it's more like I'm throwing these punches and kicks out just because I know I'm supposed to. Like, that's Viana's striking to me. And for as good as she is on the ground, you kind of, you talked right up to the point I wanted to make, where it's going to be hard to pick somebody whose best avenues to victory are on the ground, but doesn't have a clear way to get it there in Viana. Having said that, I mean, if she has a chance against anyone, it's going to be someone like Ricci, who is much, much smaller than she is going to give up a ton of reach. And while Ricci hits hard, almost nobody at 115 has just flatline knockout power. So even if Ricci touches her up a bit, like, Viana really just needs to get this to the ground once. She's shown that she is equally dangerous off her back as in top position. Just, I can't pick it either. Like, I really want to visualize the way that, Viana maybe gets outstruck for a round and a half or maybe 2 full rounds and just, gets one ugly trip takedown against the fence, and 30 seconds later this thing is over. But I think that's the outside chance. I think what's more likely is that Tabatha, adult shark Ricci, just, outstrikes her for 3 rounds. It probably won't be pretty. Like, we're going to see some ugly takedown attempt from the outside by Viana. We'll probably see some clinch exchanges where Ricci's just shucking the much taller woman off of her and returning to kind of that middle distance. But give me the Tabatha Ricci by decision in this one. We head now to the middleweight division for a matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Dusko Todorovic. Njokuani, the 33-year-old Nigerian American, is 21-7 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a longtime Bellator roster member and then a veteran of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. It took him over a decade to get to the UFC. It took him less than 20 seconds to pick up his first win there, as he debuted in February at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Strickland and knocked out Marc-Andre Barriault in just 16 seconds. On the back of that sensational debut, he gets to meet, he gets an upgrade in opponent and gets to meet Dusko Todorovic. The 27-year-old Serbian is 11-2 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out. It was last December at UFC on ESPN, Font versus Aldo, where he knocked out Maki Pitolo late in the 1st round. That turned things around for him after back-to-back losses to Punahele Soriano and Gregory Rodriguez. The odds on this one, Njokuani, a moderate favorite in the early lines. He's -175. Todorovic +150. Keith, I mean, Chidi Njokuani is a guy that I assumed we would never see in the UFC.
Don't do it, Ben.
I mean, he left Bellator. He lost 3 of his last 4.
Yeah.
Didn't look great in them. One fight in LFA. Then he's on the Contender Series, smashed a dude. He's in the UFC, destroyed Marc-Andre Barriault. I mean, he's 33. He's in the UFC now. He's got the highlight win. Like, is there like some actual upside and potential for a run here? And who do you see winning between him and Todorovic?
Dude, it's so funny. So you didn't do it like the UFC has been doing it, but like, they're making Chidi Njokuani sound like that he was some fighter that the fans were just dying to make in the UFC. Like you're in the Sherdog forums and someone asks, like, who's the best fighters to never fight in the UFC? Or who's the fighters you wish for in the UFC? And people are like Fedor Emelianenko, Bibiano Fernandez, Ricardo Arona, Chidi Njokuani. I mean,
No.
Where the hell did Chidi and Njokuani become some world beater?
I mean, he's the other Njokuani brother.
Yeah, well, you know what? He might not be anymore. He really might not be.
But I mean, just like in the mental, But he always was the other Njokuani brother.
Sure. I mean, he's got some. Obviously, I'm just joking on that. Like the narrative that was going on about like 10 years in the making. Like, really? Yeah, he's got some skills. I mean, he's a long and lengthy fighter. He's got like an 80-inch reach. Can
you believe he used to fight at welterweight?
Yeah, it's insane.
That's ridiculous. Anyway, go ahead.
He's a very good kickboxer. He's very composed. He does what kickboxers do. He stands up too tall for my liking, but I love some of the way he cuts angles. He's one of these guys who switches stance mid-attack. We saw the best of him though in his debut. Like that's what he can do when he is on. But there's also times we've seen him just be completely gun shy, scared to pull the trigger. But when he lands, he's got the power. We saw a good clinch fighter when he gets inside. He can sneak in a takedown. He's not completely one-dimensional. But I think I'm not calling him a wrestler. He did show that he could win a grappling battle on the Contender Series against Mario Souza. He landed some good ground and pound in that. But historically speaking, he's been a weak defensive wrestler. They'll say he's a BJJ black belt, and I guess he did out-grapple Mario Souza, but he is not a submission threat. He's not going to catch him a submission. Todorovic, southpaw, who is pretty well-rounded, but he really hasn't lived up to the potential I thought he had in Contender Series. Actually, one of the guys I was pretty high on. Some of the things I like: stiff jab, works the body, plus power, has some pretty good movement, slip and rip. He really depends on it because he stands up too high. He keeps his hands low. I mean, Puno Soriano knocked him out because of it. But he's a good wrestler. We need to see more of him wrestling. He's great in the clinch. When he initiates the clinch, he's busy in the offense. He can grind out a decision, but he's also a great wrestler. Drives through hips, good trips, good throws, really good top control, really good ground and pound, constantly looking to advance position. And he's got 3 submission wins. So that's the things I like about him. But he's been a little chinny in the UFC, a little gun shy. His defense has been out the window. So this fight really aggravates me because I feel like there's a very very favorable matchup for Todorovic. Like I see a golden opportunity for him to win. If he turns into a wrestling match, he should have such an advantage. However, I can't trust him. I think he stands up with Chidi too much, and I think my mind is saying he's going to get knocked out. But the wrestling advantage is there. I can't ignore it. I really want to be right about this guy because I was one of the flag bearers for him coming off the Contender Series. So I want to say he kind of gets his head out of his ass for this fight. He sees that there's enough film on Chidi to not make me think that suddenly he's some great grappler. Give me Todorovic to out-wrestle him and win a decision.
This really is a kind of 2 true outcomes fight, because I had the very same thought as you, where this fight is there for the taking for Todorovic if he pushes the issue with the wrestling and does it early. Because the thing is, even if he goes for a takedown within the first 30 seconds of this fight, even if he doesn't get that one, it's going to turn into one of those fights where Njokuani starts throwing 4 strikes around. You know, we've all seen it. In Bellator, his fight with Melvin Gillard was one of the most miserable things, and he's had a couple highlight reel finishes recently, but you're right. He's the guy who can be just bizarrely gun shy at times. He is one of the best kickboxers in the UFC. He's he never stopped taking Muay Thai bouts. So you look at his MMA record and just know that he has dozens and dozens of Muay Thai matches as well. He's never stopped doing it. He's not one of those people that had a kickboxing career then switched over to MMA and just changed tracks and stayed with it. He has stayed active as a kickboxer. Very very good for all the reasons Keith mentioned. And I'm with you. I'm not even sure Njokuani should be the favorite here. If I had faith that Todorovic was going to fight to his own best advantage, I think this should be about to pick him, because it just comes down to whether he'd be able to do it. But I'm with you. Todorovic enjoys his own striking a little too much. He has been shown to be a little chinny. Punahele Soriano, he hits like a truck, but his striking offense is far less diverse than Njokuani's. And he is dangerous from a lot fewer ranges than Njokuani is. Like if Todorovic like commits that kind of defensive lapse anywhere within about 5 feet of Njokuani, he's going to sleep. And that's going to be my pick. Give me Chidi Njokuani to get a first round knockout here, and the hype train is going to start cranking over time. It's probably not justified. I think Njokuani's upside is kind of limited. He is what he is as a fighter, and he's already, pushing into his mid 30s, but it is going to be a hell of a lot of fun while it lasts. And matchmaking this dude on Saturday night, if I'm right, is going to be a whole lot of fun. That brings us to what, at least currently, is listed as the co-main event of UFC Vegas 55, a welterweight matchup between Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. Ponzinibbio, the 35-year-old Argentinian, is 28-5 overall. He is 10-4 in the UFC. Notably, he is 1-2 since returning from a almost 2.5-year layoff due to a variety of injuries and illnesses. He had left the UFC on a 7-fight win streak that had vaulted him into the fringes of the top 10, then disappeared from November 2018 till January 2021. Since returning, he has lost to Li Jingliang, defeated Miguel Baeza, and lost to Jeff Neal. The most recent of those, the Neal loss, was last December at UFC 269. He'll be taking on Pereira, a man whose essentially entire UFC career happened while the man was away. 28-year-old Brazilian is 27-11 with 2 no contests overall. He is 5-2 in the UFC. He is currently on a 4-fight win streak, those being over Zelim Imadaev, Kalen Williams, Nico Price, and Andre Fialho. The most recent of those, the Fialho win by unanimous decision at UFC 270 in January. Odds on this one, again, these are early lines. Make sure to go to BetMGM for the most up-to-date lines when you're watching this show. But as of a week and change out from Fight Night, this one's as close to a pick'em as we have on the card. Ponzinibbio, just a very slight favorite at -120. Pereira, available at even money, +100. Again, just on the early lines. Keith, 2 interesting guys here. I mean, Ponzinibbio, a guy who looked to be just blazing a trail to at least the welterweight title picture, and he combined that elusive quality that you and I have talked about a few times, the combination of beating high-level fighters and just being an absolute savage every time out and having like finishes and exciting fights, then disappeared for a couple of years and has frankly just not been the same guy since. He's got to prove that he's still a factor here, and he's going to have to do it against Pereira, who to me is kind of the opposite. I figured the Pereira joke wasn't going to last very long in the UFC, especially after those back-to-back losses to Tristan Connolly and Diego Sanchez. But since then, he's beaten 4 straight guys, and they've been good guys. Like, if the way to get into the top 10 in the UFC welterweight division is to beat the guys in the 11 through 20, Imadaev, Chaos Williams, Nico Price, and Andre Fialho, might all 4 of them be in that category. And he's beaten them all. Like, all of a sudden, I'm looking at this guy a little differently. I mean, he came to the UFC. He already had 9 losses. And, some of the losses were to people whose names he got busted up by Dusko Todorovic, shortly before he joined the UFC. And he was so wild. I mean, he made Johnny Walker look like, John Jones, like first round John Jones. Just, like just, wild man in his first couple fights. Like he beat Danny Roberts in his first fight, which, I mean, he was throwing like Showtime punches off the cage like most fighters throw a jab, doing capoeira stuff, breakdancing his way out to the cage. And then, but now I look at it, you know what? He lost 2 straight fights, but he lost to Tristan Connolly because he gassed out in a fight where he was beating him bad. And then he lost to Diego Sanchez because he committed a stupid foul in a fight where he was beating him bad. Yeah. Like a little smarter version of Michel Pereira is 7-0 in the UFC right now. And all of a sudden he's fighting a little smarter.
Yeah.
Like, I know they booked him against people like Chaos Williams and Nico Price because they were like, oh, we're going to smash these 2 guys together and just something crazy has got to happen. And nothing crazy has happened. All that's happened is he's shown himself to manage his gas tank. He's won fairly straightforward kickboxing matches against good kickboxers. Oh, and by the way, he's flexed a wrestling game that we never knew he had. Like, you assumed he would be able to wrestle because he's an absolute specimen at 170. I mean, he is big and he is so muscular. But all of a sudden, he's suplexing Kalen Williams. Like, he's getting effortless takedowns on Nico Price. Like, this guy, he's still just 28 years old. And he's kind of starting to look like a problem for the division. And he's taking out a guy in Ponzinibbio that not only, like, he got blasted by Li Jingliang. That's a tough ask to come back and take on a hard-hitting, borderline top 15 guy in your first fight back from, like, your deathbed. The Miguel Baeza win has not aged well.
Nope.
And the Jeff Neal loss, I mean, it's a good loss, except that's also the fight where Jeff Neal got, like, pulled over for being drunk and having a weapon in his car, like, 11 days before the fight, and we were all wondering if he was going to make weight, if he was going to be in jail, if you like all that, like Jeff Neal's a very good fighter, but even that one is kind of like, oh man, that was your chance, Ponzi, to, like, step up and make a statement, and Neal was fine. Just, this is two guys on.
Do you want to be the guy who drives around with a gun in his car? You might want to let that guy win.
Oh man, it's hard for me to picture a matchup between two guys on more opposite trajectories that the UFC could actually make the matchup and have it make sense. But yeah, I think this is bad news for Ponzinibbio, because Pereira still has a ton of power and still throws with knockout power, like a variety of strikes from a variety of angles. If Ponzinibbio comes out and starts cold, because, I mean, he used to be a fast starter, and now he's kind of a cold starter, he could get starched in the first round like Lee did to him. If this turns into more of a war of attrition like he had with Baeza, I think that favors Pereira. He's bigger. His gas tank is not a problem. He can wrestle Ponzinibbio. Like, and if it's late and they're both tired, like, he'll probably get easy takedowns on him. Like, it's hard for me to picture the way that Ponzinibbio wins this without either something lucky happening, which, I mean, you can't really account for that, or Pereira doing something really stupid, which he just doesn't really do anymore. Give me Michel Pereira by second round TKO. It's going to be sad if you're, like, used to love watching Ponzinibbio fight, but this is just going to be kind of one more nail in the coffin and one more bit of evidence that maybe Ponzinibbio is in serious decline since coming back from that 2-year layoff.
Yeah, so he lost the good guys, Ponzinibbio. So it's tough to really get a grasp on him. But I think you're saying a lot of things are true. This is the fight. If he loses this fight, then kind of put him to the side a little bit. He would just kind of be a card filler at that point. This is really the fight that I'm looking forward to on the entire card because of all the things you're saying. Like, do we find out if Pereira is for real? Do we find out if Ponzinibbio is, still in the mix? Like, what is it? No, Ponzinibbio, he's a good striker. He's a very smart fighter. Like, he's got really good footwork. He understands range well. He uses feints to set up his shots. I go back to, I think it was the Mike Perry fight. I go all the way back. I put this in my notes, Ponzinibbio, but I've never taken out. I like when Daniel Cormier was pointing out, like, him winning foot battle. I think it was Mike Perry. He was winning a foot battle with Mike Perry. He was just lining up his right hand, but just by getting on the inside of the foot battle, which is something that he just, little details that he picks up. Pretty explosive, fast, throws combinations. Everything comes off his jab. His hook is kind of like his money strike. He's got plus power, beautiful calf kicks. He's an okay wrestler. He can sneak in the takedown. Though he doesn't really wrestle that much. Good cardio. He won't really slow down. Like, he's still pressing hard deep into the fight. And he's mentally strong. He won't crumble in there's a fight. Like, in a fight that's a war, like, he's shown his ability to, like, survive that. But these are, like, everything I said about him is, like, good Ponzinibbio. Like, he knocked out Miguel Baeza, but he was losing that fight. Or, like, I had to kind of make a comeback in that fight. So that's a little disturbing. Michel Pereira, like, he's such a big welterweight. The guy looks like a light heavyweight. He's massive. He's got those long arms, those long legs. He's arguably the best athlete in the UFC. Like, he's fast. He's so explosive. He's constantly moving forward. He cuts the cage off well. He throws out feints to kind of set up his power shots. You mentioned, like, the run he's on and beating good guys. I go back to, like, the Amedovski fight. He showed that he can win an outside striking battle against a good striker in Amedovski. He attacks the body. He'll throw. I love. I mentioned this before in the notes for him. He'll throw flying knees both offensively and defensively. Like he'll stop takedowns by just the threat of like quickly throwing his legs up. He uses it. He uses it to close the distance or just kind of stop his opponent's attacks. I love his step in knees. Great kicks, oblique kicks, teep kicks. And you mentioned like suddenly he has this wrestling background. Like if you told me Michel Pereira was going back like 3 or 4 fights ago, and you said Michel Pereira was a wrestler, I would thought you were talking about like WWF wrestling, like like all the moonsaults and all the shit he's doing. Like, is it possible Michel Pereira, if you put a mask on him, he's like you have Rey Mysterio Jr. Is he like Rey Mysterio Senior? Is like we don't because like if Rey Mysterio's next. I don't know. I don't know. Does he still wrestle? I have no idea. But if Michel Pereira
he's pushing 50. He probably wressles like in some small organization.
All right, I didn't realize he's that old. Okay, but like Michel Pereira, like that could be his tag team partner. Just run out. It's just like go back Dos Casares style. Let Michel Pereira wear Lucha Libre mask. Like everything we say about Michel Pereira, like he can wrestle now. He beat Chaos Williams wrestling. You mentioned like he suplexed Chaos Williams. He also suplexed Diego Sanchez. His cardio has come a long way. And why is his cardio? Why is he showing signs that he's got cardio? Yeah, because he's not doing all that crazy stuff. But you know what? I hate that he stopped doing that. Because like, is he a much better fighter? Yeah, he's way better fighter. But like, we have a whole bunch of good fighters. Like, let's have the guy who's gonna go full breakdown dancing in match, or some guy like I want him to like somehow like go to full WWF where he like tries throwing the opponent outside the ring and like jumps off like the barrier in front of the the fans.
Right on the scorer's table.
Yeah,
like they always go through one of the tables.
Yeah. Like I want that. Like screw it. Like I don't want another like good fighter in the division. As far as prediction goes, Ponzinibbio is still the more technically sound fighter. He definitely has more experience. He's definitely a smarter fighter. And Pereira's taken a big step up in competition. Like I know he's beaten good guys. You mentioned like the Andre Fiallo fight it's really, really aged well. Like that looks really good. Chaos Williams is a good win. I can't remember who else you said, but like he's
Nico Price, who's
Nico
still
Price. Yeah, like he's had a good run. He's had a good run, but this is still a step up for him, and it's a little bit of a gut call. I thought I was going to be the one to kind of go with the upset. I've always been on the Michel Pereira train. Like when people were jumping off, I was the guy saying like, yeah, he was fooling around in the conflict. Like yeah, he also like 10-8 him the first round, and Diego Sanchez, like, come on, Diego was asking the referee, do I win if the fight ends? Do I win? Like, give me Pereira, give me him to get some takedowns, do some fun shit. Give me Pereira by I'll see split decision.
There you go. 2 picks for the slight upset in Michel Pereira in the co-main event. That brings us to the main event of UFC Fight Night 206, a bantamweight matchup between former champ Holm and rising contender Ketlen Vieira. Holm, the 40-year-old Albuquerque native, is 14-5 overall. She is 7-5 in the UFC. It is worth noting that she is 6-3 at bantamweight in the UFC, having lost only to Miesha Tate, Valentina Shevchenko, and Amanda Nunes. She is on a 2-fight winning streak right now. Both of them are unanimous decision wins over Raquel Pennington and Irene Aldana. That is the good news. The bad news is that the most recent of those, the Aldana fight, was in October of 2020. So it is about a 1.5 year layoff for the preacher's daughter. Welcoming her back will be Vieira. The 30-year-old Brazilian is 12-2 overall. She is 6-2 in the UFC. She won her last time out. It was in November of last year in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 198, where she won a unanimous decision over former champ Miesha Tate. Prior to that, last February, she dropped a unanimous decision to Yana Kunitskaya at UFC Fight Night Blades versus Lewis. Early odds on this one, obviously go over to BetMGM for the latest odds when you're watching this. But as of right now, about a week out from Fight Night, Holm is a comfortable favorite. She's minus 220. Vieira plus 185. Keith, a lot of faith out there for a 40-year-old woman who hasn't fought in like 19 months. Is it a vote of confidence in Holm? Is it a vote of no confidence in Vieira? Who do you have in this one?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, two things that jump up to me. I didn't realize she was out that long. Like I knew she. If you told me Holly Holm fought 6 months ago, I would have believed you. I didn't realize she was out that long. 40 years old actually surprised me too. If you asked me, like obviously I know that because I did the tape study and I looked these things up. But if you asked me like how old Holly Holm was, I would have guessed like she's probably up there. She's probably like 35 to 36. Yeah, 40 is really surprising. I mean, it's like holy crap. The thing about Holly Holm and this obviously is judging of what we last saw her. Like I can't predict how much better she's got, but obviously you're 40. That's getting concerning. And I say this all the time. Like the higher you get up in age, the more likely suddenly just everything collapses. It's going to happen. But Holly Holm is a great athlete. She really is. Like she's got tons of high level experience. She looked so good in her last fight. She's a southpaw who's long and lengthy. She's an outboxer with some of the best footwork in not just women's MMA but entire MMA. I mean, obviously it's a really long time ago, but like the perfect example of it is the Ronda Rousey fight where she's just out of the way of every strike with her footwork. She's a counter striker. She's high volume, even if that means she's striking from miles away from her opponent. She's staying busy. Her straight punches down the pipe. Her left hand is really accurate. She does lack power though. Like she's a bit of just a point fighter. Like she's gonna win, a striking battle from just outside. A lot of kicks though. I always name one of her kicks out. Like anytime someone does like a side kick, I always call it the Holly Holm side kick. She does so much. She does really good at keeping her distance with that, and that's where she wants to fight at distance. One of the very best high kicks in the game. She throws it super fast. She also throws it a lot more often now. She has a lot of confidence in her high kick. She's an underrated grappler, really is. Like I think she's a much better grappler. Like a lot of people remember like when she got submitted by Miesha Tate. That was a long time ago, and she was still kind of learning the game then, and obviously always learning. But I mean like she was just invited to MMA back then. Like now she's really adding seasoning to her game. She can grind in the clinch, something she does really well. I mean, you go back to like Raquel Pennington. She was winning clinch battles with Raquel Pennington, which not many people could say they do that. She can grind in the clinch, good body lock takedowns. She will shoot for a takedown. Like a perfect example of that is her last fight against Irene Aldana. Like she destroyed Irene Aldana with her wrestling. Good top control. She showed in that fight some really good ground and pound, and she has the cardio to go all 5 rounds and not slow down. The one negative on the ground is she's not a submission threat. Like she doesn't have a single. I don't think she has a single submission win on her record. Now, Move over to Ketlen Vieira. Vieira is just a big, physically strong woman. I mean, you see her; she's imposing. She got long arms. She's a counter striker, boxing style, busy jab. Tend to like throw the up jab. She tends to throw from her hips. A lot of like looping shots, very like Fedor Emelianenko style, where they kind of come from weird angles. But she tends to lack hand speed. That's like the thing about Fedor. Fedor through these looping styles. He also had blazing fast hands. Ketlen Vieira is not the case. Does like knockout power. Even though she's so big, she does lack knockout power. She has some defensive flaws. She pulls her head straight back. Is the biggest thing. But in close is where she really excels. She's got some really good in close quarter striking. I go back to like the Kat Zingano fight, which I know was a really long time ago, but she butchered Kat Zingano in the clinch. She's a very good grappler. She's got some good takedowns. She's a black belt in both judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She threw Sarah McMahon Olympic silver medals on her head. So that tells you about how good her takedowns is. She out-grappled in some really good grapplers. I mentioned Sarah McMahon, Sajara Eubanks, Kat Zingano, Yana Kunitskaya. Like, those are some good – she's got some good grappling chops. So as far as the fight goes and a prediction, this is This is an intriguing fight. I'm reading. I'm looking at my notes. I wrote fun fight. Then I'm like, no, it's not a fun fight, but it's intriguing. But I'm taking Holm. Yeah, being that she's 40, being that I was surprised by her age, not now, but like this week, how old she was. That gave me a little bit to pause. But my last memory of Holly Holm was an absolute brilliant performance and one of the best performances of her career. She looked amazing against Aldana. She was fast. She was accurate. She had high output. She's going to have to stay on her bike. She's going to have to use a lot of footwork. She's going to have to avoid the clinch at all costs, which is surprising because she's showed such a willingness to grapple lately. But stick and move, beat her with volume, and just win a point kickboxing. And it's kind of like the MMA gods. Like we got Ketlen Chikagian and Holly Holm in back-to-back weeks. Just for the record, the Ketlen Chikagian fight hasn't happened yet. We're actually recording this before that. So if that's like an all-time war, ignore what I'm saying. But as far as this fight, I think Holly Holm is going to do the same strategy that I predicted Ketlen Chikagian did. I don't know if she does it, but what I predicted Ketlen Chikagian did, stick and move and ride yourself to a victory. Give me going all 25 minutes, Holly Holm by decision.
I love a lot of what you laid out here. Like Holly Holm's path as a mixed martial artist has been so strange and unexpected. I mean, she came over as a champion level boxer, and kind of a late starter. Like she was 29 or 30, like by the time of her debut, and she was like 32 by the time she was in the UFC. Like I would never have really pegged her as someone who would become one of the most accomplished women ever to do it. And even the way, because she came across as a very well-credentialed boxer. And we're not talking about like Claressa Shields, who went 10-0 in a big weight class where there aren't many women. We're talking about someone who boxed in like the kind of mid 130s, which is crowded divisions for women, and had a long career and won titles. And she comes across.
Think about this for a second. Katie Taylor just won, and they're saying the most marketable fight they could do is a boxing match with Holly Holm. Like that's how good she was.
Yeah. There you go. And she came over, and as Keith already pointed out, her boxing isn't really what stood out. And like she's never been a knockout artist with her hands. Like basically all of her MMA knockouts have either been finished or at the very least set up by kicks, usually head kicks. Like she just came across, and her athleticism is, and obviously the diligence to like learn the kicking game is what's made that run for her on the feet. I mean, Keith, have you ever been in the same room as Holly Holm, like been face to face with her?
No.
She is a specimen. Like I was kind of talking, early on this card about how Jailton Almeida looks like what a casual assumes one of the toughest men in the world should look like. Like Holly Holm is an absolute specimen. It's almost awe-inspiring, just like how much muscle tone she has. Well, I mean, it's not like she like looks like, an East German hammer thrower from like the 1970s Olympics or something. Like she's still obviously identifiably female. She also shows up on like, those weird lists of like hottest women in MMA, but she is an absolute specimen of an athlete. So if there's anyone who could disappear from age 38 to 40 and not, suffer too much slippage of that top gear, if there's someone who could do the Marion Renault type thing and just still be basically athletically the same fighter, like past 40, she's probably the one who could do it. And it's really my only worry here. Nothing else that Ketlen Vieira brings worries me too much in the case of Holly Holm. You pointed out that first her kicking game and then also her wrestling and grappling have become incredibly like powerful tools for her. She's become a really, really well-rounded fighter. And what makes all of that run is what an intelligent fighter she is. It's kind of fitting that she's one of the last stars of that original class left at Jackson Wink because, on the way up in the early 2010s, everyone was like, Greg Jackson will come up with the perfect plan for his fighters to beat the other fighter. And Holly Holm is the perfect example of that because she is perfectly willing to embrace whichever one of her tools stands to her best advantage. She beat the crap out of Irene Aldana, mostly with her wrestling. And in the fifth round was a 10-8 round. Not only did she have gas, but she got Aldana down again and was beating the crap out of her against Megan Anderson. Like she completely nullified Anderson just by taking her down easily in all 3 rounds. Like, it was kind of the first indication that, okay, Anderson's got limitations. She's not going to be the one to beat Cyborg for us. Because of that, I trust that she is going to follow her best path to victory against Vieira, and it's probably the opposite of that. It's probably going to be to use her foot speed, her footwork, to keep the distance, just kind of win a distance kickboxing battle against Vieira as Vieira just kind of plods towards her and tries to force the clinch. And I think she's going to be able to do so. Unless there's been a huge decline in Holmes' athleticism, I think this is a pretty straightforward and easy for her to, it'll look easy for her to do, even it won't be super easy for us to watch because it is 5 rounds. But yeah, give me Holm in a fight where she probably just wins a very straightforward 50-45. And Vieira honestly doesn't have many even moments where like there's hope that she might do a ton of damage. And then after that, we'll be talking about why Ketlen Vieira is not fighting at 145. Because you pointed out she might be the biggest bantamweight in the division. And the next question is, well, how does she make bantamweight? Well, the answer is she doesn't always. She missed weight just 2 fights ago against Yana Kunitskaya and then got beat up. Like, wouldn't you take Aldana against, Norma Demontre, Macy Chasson tomorrow? I'd think hard about it. It'll be another conversation about the future of the featherweight division, but put me down for a decision win for Holly Holm as well. That's it. This has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 206, Holm versus Aldana, also known as UFC Vegas 55. If you're watching for the first time, first of all, thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you gathered something of value from it. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave us a message in the comments. Both Keith and I are good about responding to those. We'd love to hear from you. If you disagree with us, if you agree with us, if you thought something was funny, would love to hear from you. Most importantly, please know that the Shillan and Duffy show also does a recap after these events. So 10 or 15 minutes after the main event, we will be live on the Sherdog YouTube page, breaking down all the action from this card. We will go top to bottom instead of bottom to top. Keith takes the host chair, and we will talk about what was good, what was bad, what was controversial, what is next for the winners as well as the losers. We hand out some prizes, and the live chat section is wide open, so listeners, hopefully yourself included, will be weighing in with your questions, your hot takes. If we got any of these picks wrong, especially if it's the Uros Medic fight, absolutely let us have it. And, we would love to see you there. Between now and then, thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the fights.